Welcome to Coastal Front. Join us each week as we sit down with the movers and shakers of Vancouver to discuss stories of business, politics, accomplishment, and failure. Our aim is to keep you dialed into what matters most in our city. Now, here's your host, Andrew Johns.
Great. Well, here we are with Ed Quilty, founder and CEO of Aquatic Informatics. Have I got that right, Ed?
You got it right. You banged it. Yep.
Great, man. Well, we play some beer league hockey together, and I know you mostly for your hacking skills and your grinding your wrist shot, block shots.
Yeah. Well, I know you for your hat trick and your legendary tweet without a shirt and holding the cup. It was a big moment this past year.
Yeah, you know, that Friday night hockey that we play is pretty. I wish there were more scouts in the stands, but
there should be. It's that quality for sure. Yeah.
But look, I have you here today because I want to talk about a topic that's really important to a lot of people, and I think you could probably enlighten a lot of us because you work in the world of water. So maybe start off by telling me a little bit about what is Aquatic Informatics.
Yeah, so we're a software company,
Okay.
and we manage water information across the entire water cycle. So really, from raindrop through rivers, groundwater, through people, factories, animals, farms, hydropower, and then back into the receive environment. Usually along the way, it's polluted or consumed and then cleaned up sometimes and then put back into the environment.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've actually got customers in 60 countries. We've got 2,000 customers.
Wow.
Many of them are municipalities or utilities who are mandated with managing, drinking water, cleaning it up, making sure it's safe.
Yeah.
And wastewater as well, making sure that the nasty bits that come out of factories and people and farms are cleaned up when they go back into the environment.
Yeah.
That's the intention anyhow.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. I do a lot of business with municipalities across the country, and I get the luxury of traveling across this country, and I'm always amazed that with the amount of fresh water supply I believe, do have in Canada, where you hear these stories about some of these remote communities, like there's that one, forget the name of the indigenous community up north last winter, and came out that they were been boiling their water for like 5 years. How does that happen? Like, shouldn't they have access to fresh water?
Yeah, well, it's as you can imagine, it's a complicated story. So they'll have access sometimes to fresh water, but it doesn't mean it's clean. And
so there's a difference between fresh water and clean water.
Yeah, fresh water is basically what you get in lakes and rivers. It's not salt water.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't polluted, it'd be perhaps safe or likely safe for human consumption.
Yeah.
But even in remote locations, you'll have you might have heard fecal coliforms is a term that is where you'll get bacteria from animal feces. So it could be even a remote location. It could be a moose, it could be a bear, wolf, and that gets in the drinking water. It can be quite dangerous actually.
Yeah. Isn't it true that if you're out in the woods like that, or you're out in the back 40, if you're going to drink water, you want to drink fast-moving water versus slow? Is that?
I think it's a bit of a myth. You could just
Okay.
have more. The moose could be
lucky.
right upstream from you, and it just happens flowing, fast towards you. So it's a bit of hit and miss.
Yeah.
And generally we're quite fortunate in Canada. We do have great water sources, but you'd be surprised some of the stats. So of all the waste, we generate a lot of wastewater, like all, parts of the world.
Yeah.
But in places like British Columbia, beautiful, pristine, green BC, up to 30% of our wastewater goes back into the environment untreated. And then our kids are swimming in the water or getting it in their mouth.
Really?
And they can be quite dangerous. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
30%.
Most people wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
In other parts of BC, it's actually, or other parts of Canada, it's much better. Like Ontario is more like 1 or 2%.
No way.
But if you think worldwide, there's some amazing stats. Like if you look at all the hospital beds right now in the world, if you're able to find out why people are in each of those hospital beds, half of them, 50%, would be full of people who are sick from water-related diseases worldwide.
Really?
So it's a massive issue. And then if you add up...
That's why they came into the hospitals, because 50% of them came in
Yep.
because of some water-related issue. They got some sick somehow.
Yeah, usually a gastrointestinal disease. And if you're immunocompromised, which is usually children or elderly people.
Yeah.
But you and I both have young kids. Mine
Yeah.
are 2 and 5.
Yeah.
You've got 3 young kids.
Yeah.
So every year, almost 2 million children die around the world from water-related diseases.
Wow.
So as a parent, you can really relate to that, right?
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
a motivating factor for me. So what causes that? There's a lot of sources of water contamination. And when you say a stat like that, a lot of people think, well, that's, developing countries. That's
that's Africa.
Yeah.
That's India. China.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's true.
Yeah.
It is. But it's also here, like I said, even BC, 30% of our wastewater can go back into the environment. So worldwide, if you add up all the rivers in the world, just think of like the Amazon, the Congo, the Nile, the Fraser here in BC, add up all the rivers in the world, times that by 6, that's the amount of wastewater pouring into the environment every year around the world. Really? Drawn from aquifers, from groundwater and other areas. So it's a massive problem. And 80% of it worldwide is not treated. So 80%
of the water that goes back into the environment is not treated at all.
So it'll have
laundry detergent and
exactly sewage. So raw sewage, which we talked about, is quite dangerous. It could have.
They still do this in Victoria,
Yeah, I know.
It's crazy. I grew up in my high school and university.
Yeah, I went to UVic actually.
To UVic, I think we were there at the same time.
Yeah.
And didn't you and I date the same girls?
Well, I saw you empty a keg into your mouth at one go. That was a good party. Yeah,
exactly. And as a grown up there in high school, like you always knew who the tourists were down in Williams Beach because they were the ones in the water.
Yeah.
Because any locals would be like, I'm not going to that water. That water is like full of sewage.
Yeah. No, it's a big problem. So it's human waste, industrial waste. It can have like embalming fluids. It can have radioactive waste. Anything all the industries.
80%.
All sorts of pharmaceuticals. Lots of nasty byproducts.
Yeah, I've always wondered about my wife's got a medical background, so she's always made a point of making sure any extra medicines and things we take it back to London drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
To try and have it disposed of properly. Because I imagine if people just throw their pills in the toilet, that gets down into the water system, and it's gonna do something to the environment.
Yeah, and the wastewater treatment plants aren't really designed for taking that out before it goes back in the drinking water. So that's part of our business actually. If I kind of back up where I started.
Yeah.
So I started as a stream ecologist. I worked for BC Environment for the pollution prevention branch. I worked with Environment Canada, and really studying water across all water. We're doing marine studies around pulp mills and other polluting sources.
Did you have
forestry.
a passion? Sorry to interrupt, but did you have a passion for this before you got out of school? Like you were obviously going this direction in university, but was there something kind of inspired you to get into this particular space?
Failure inspired me. So, or bad luck maybe is better. So I was, as I mentioned, I was at UVic, did undergrad, I did biology there. My first work term was at a fish hatchery where I basically vacuumed fish poop for 4 months in the pouring rain. So
where was that?
It was in Sayward, like northern Vancouver Island, near Campbell River.
Yeah.
Big Tree Creek hatchery, and that was good. It was a good experience. So that was my first sort of exposure to water. And then I worked for the province for the Fish and Wildlife branch. Got to hike into lakes and see what was in them, what was the quality of water, what were the species, were they good fishing lake for recreational fishing. And the reason was to look at whether they could do logging right up to the lake or not.
Oh wow.
But I kind of fell into it like almost everyone in undergrad. Most people want to do marine biology and study whales or fuzzy mammals, and those were all the really good jobs. And I actually had a good job lined up on that first work term where I was going to track elk. So that was kind of the dream job. That's more what I had in mind when I came out of high school and went to university. And that job fell through with about a week before the work term started. So I ended up at the fish hatchery vacuum out fish poop, and that was the beginning of my water career. And then, like I said, I went to the Fish and Wildlife branch and got more into fisheries and water quality. And then a similar thing happened. I think it was in my third year. Job fell through, and the only job left was one up in the Kootenays that it seemed no one would take. It was not a popular job. You're basically looking at acid mine drainage. So at the time in Kimberley, in the Kootenays there, got a big Cominco mine there. So the job was to basically take water samples downstream of the mine and look at the impacts. And it was so fascinating to see what the impacts were at the time. Yeah. And
it's an aluminum mine, right?
Copper, lead, zinc, I think, if I remember correctly. And it was just fascinating. So I really got hooked there. And it was a bit of luck. like, you really don't go into the environment business or in water if you want to have make a lot of money. There's obviously other measures of success, but to make money, that's not where you go as a environmentalist. And if you did see me at UVic, I would have had a beard, a Mac jacket, Birkenstocks on, long hair, ponytail, like
you'd be hard to identify.
Yeah, I would different than I look now. Yeah,
you'd fit in with everybody else there.
Yeah, that's right. So it was I was passionate environmentalist, but wasn't thinking about 25 years later having a software company was not on my mind.
Yeah, it's
but
wild.
Again, a bit of an opportunity as we were looking at impacts of industry in the Kootenays. There's a new emerging technology coming out where you'd measure water quality continuously using these sensors. So typically you would go out and you take a bottle and you take a sample and send it to a laboratory and get the results back weeks later, and you'd only take maybe a few samples a year, maybe more, but usually not more than maybe once a week or a month.
Okay.
But what had happened while I was on this work term, pure chance, there was a very proactive group down there that was fairly innovative for BC environment. A fellow named Les McDonald was a pollution prevention biologist there. And they had ordered in the sensor that measures water quality continuously. So instead of sending the sample to the lab, you can just put a sensor in the river and it just measures things like pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen continuously.
Did this person actually build this equipment, or was it built?
No, they purchased it.
Okay.
And it was a technology that was emerging because it's hard to put really sensitive electronics into a river that freezes over, has boulders running down in it. If you've ever waded across a river, it's not a gentle environment.
Yeah.
So I got a chance to install these sensors and play with them. And it was a pretty unique experience. I was like, wow, this is really going to change the way, people study water and study the environment. It's sort of the equivalent of having an EKG in the river, continuously monitoring, versus going to the doctor once every 2 years. It's really different. Or it's like a smartwatch, measuring your health.
Instead of, once a week checking your pulse when you woke up in the morning, now you got these smart devices that are constantly monitoring your
Exactly.
Heart,
So I was really excited by this. So this is going to be, having been through a number of these different roles and always finding it hard, we just could never collect enough information. If people are, withdrawing pollution in the middle of the night, we're probably, as government workers, we weren't out working. Or if it was Christmas Eve. So it was hard to track down, and it's we live in Canada. It's a big environment. There's a lot of space. So if you want to take a sample, it might drive 5 or 6 hours for one sample.
Right.
Or take a helicopter. So this I thought would be a game changer. So that led me down the path. I was like, this is exciting. So I got really, into installing these sensors, researching them. Actually took a year off and backpacked around the world, which actually we can come back to that later. Actually, how it impacted our business later. I came back and got a job here in the Lower Mainland at the BC Environment Office in Surrey, helping manage this program where we're looking at the time, the impacts of, I don't know if you remember Forest Renewal BC program.
Forest Renewal BC?
Yeah, this was sort of in the mid-90s where there was a bunch of forest stumpage fees were set aside to...
Oh, I remember this,
to retrain people, to do remediation, environmental remediation, et cetera, rehab. And so I helped manage a project there. I was pretty young, but I got that job because I had this unique experience. Okay. And they were going to start using these sensors more. Yeah. So we started installing those, getting more and more and more information. And so you got to remember before...
And what year is this roughly?
This is 95.
Okay. So even though you get collecting real-time information, it's probably because you didn't have the internet at that point.
Yeah.
You're probably still having to go back and grab the data,
exactly.
Right? But your data... log is much longer.
Yeah, so exactly. So that we did actually get data through two ways. One, the more traditional way, or the way we typically did it, was we'd go out to the site and hook up to the computer on the stream, so a data logger, and download all the data that had been collected since we were last there. It was usually 4 to 6 weeks we'd go out, so we have to clean the sensors, collect and download the data, and then we take that back to the office and try and process it. But for some sites, it was quite expensive at the time. We could hook it up to like radio telemetry and get the data coming back to the office live through modems and all the old kind of technology you used to use. And so the really important sites, we would hook it up so we could get a live feed, but it was really expensive. But in either case, we'd get the data back And at the time when I came out of undergrad and was doing more sort of fisheries work, environmental, if you had like 30 samples, that was a nice data set, statistically significant. Perhaps you could start drawing trends. Now we're getting 30,000 samples every year, from these sites or more.
And now I'm assuming in 2019, it's probably mostly real-time data.
Yeah, this is IoT now. This is the Internet of Things. This is big data, and this was the beginning of that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I was kind of stumbled into it. Started installing these sensors, trying to process the data, and said, with my background with small data sets, I don't know how to process this data. We're just overwhelmed. We could not scale what we were doing. There's just too much data. It was like the data-rich, information poor.
Yeah.
Like we could not.
And your background's not computing science, so to speak.
I used to vacuum fish poop. Like that's my background, right? And so that was a bit of a stretch. So I was like, well, I'm really passionate about this, and I want to figure out how to solve this. So I actually went back to grad school to start a PhD at UBC.
Okay.
Studying geophysics and electrical engineering type courses that those were the smart people who are used to processing high frequency data, continuous data sets, use different tools, completely different techniques. So that's where I went back to learn sort of how to process the data. It wasn't.
And had you already started Aquatic Informatics at that point? Okay.
I had just finished working for the province.
Yeah.
And then I started my own consulting firm when I was installing the sensors and manage them, called QA Environmental.
Yeah.
From that, went back to UBC, and from that PhD work, spun out Aquatic Informatics.
Okay.
And so the goal was really to go back and figure out how to process it. I was just really curious. It wasn't to start a company. It wasn't because I wanted to have a PhD and teach or anything.
Yeah. You were just really passionate about this little world you were in.
Yeah, it was like an itch I couldn't scratch. Like I just really wanted to figure out what was going on in the environment, and it coming from the environmental background. I was like, we're going to be able to figure out what's causing the problems.
Yeah.
And so from that spun out Aquatic Informatics in 2003.
Okay.
And some of the smarter kids I met at university who ended up doing a lot of my PhD work for me, and they. When I started the company, they were the first guys I hired, and we took off from there. And there was a lot of luck along the way. So that started in 2003. There was, I think we started 3 of us. We got a bunch of grants from the federal government, IRAP grants, Industrial Research Assistance Program from the National Research Council, and kind of scrapped it together for the first year or two. Yeah. And we, I made all the classic mistakes. I didn't do market research. Yeah. There were some solutions out there, not in Canada, not in BC, but if I'd searched much wider, I might not have started the company, maybe.
Yeah.
But I just had to keep going. Yeah. And so we started processing data and started selling the software to other biologists and scientists that were working in BC mostly. Yeah. And the BC Ministry of Environment, which was called at the time, was very supportive, and allowed their offices to start using it, gave us good feedback. And then we kind of got lucky. I joined the Canadian Water Resources Association, the BC branch, and we helped organize a conference here in Vancouver. We invited experts on this automated water quality monitoring in particular, from the U.S. and Canada. And we had some really big names actually showed up, even though it was a small conference, but it was very niche sort of space. And we were introduced to one of the fellows, David Breyer, was with the Us Geological Survey. Now, they're the world's largest water monitoring agency. They manage the entire U.S. National Water Information System.
Really?
So millions of sites, billions of data points for flood forecasting, for irrigation, for drinking water, you name it, groundwater and surface water. So David Breyer was here, and he'd mentioned that they were going to bid for a particular modeling toolbox. It was for converting water level into discharge or flow. Okay. And he said, "Oh, you guys look like you're doing some, cool stuff. You should look to bid on this." So we did, And it was a real stretch. There was like 4 of us at the time. And this is the world's largest monitoring agency. And honestly, my logic at the time was, when we're a real company, they might recognize us.
Right.
Let's say 5 years from now, they might recognize it. So long story short.
Get our name out there now, and
totally.
5 years, though, maybe we'll be able to win some business.
Yeah. And we weren't even thinking, we were really just doing work in BC at the time.
Yeah.
And, there's a long story goes with that, but we ended up winning the project. And this is the classic startup. There's
I remember the guys on the team talking about this. Was about 6-7 years ago?
No, this was in 2005.
2005.
There's
Okay,
another big transaction that happened at that time
Yeah.
that the guys in hockey dressing were talking about. So anyhow, they were smart though. Like for reasons that are unknown to us, they awarded the contract to us. But they said, okay, we will pay you guys once you deliver and you passed all the testing. And it was a really complex project,
Right.
And a lot at stake. Like for the U.S. This is how they accurately determine how much water is in a river. So if you think of like the Colorado River and other rivers under high pressure, every drop counts. Like every inch can be worth millions and millions of dollars. So to depend on this little Vancouver company was quite amazing to us.
Yeah.
So myself and these smart guys met at university. Taraj was our chief scientist, and Pete Hudson, who was an undergrad at the time. We just knocked it out of the park.
Really?
When I say we, they did. They totally nailed it. So we delivered. The USGS was happy, and that started a multi-year project with them. That was 2005 to 2010, where we just managed that. And in the meantime, we started growing our business. It's hard for a little Vancouver company to get global. And like I mentioned, we're in 60 countries now.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
That was the first step, was to win this big project. And then we started being more successful in Canada. Now that we had this endorsement, really, unofficial endorsement by the Us Geological Survey, we ended up winning a big project for the Canadian National System that managed actually connecting to all those sensors and managing all the data. And we had the province of British Columbia, and other provinces, and started getting states in the U.S. and other agencies. So it started kind of getting bigger and bigger. And then
it's kind of ironic that you have to almost build a reputation internationally first to be able to win some business back home.
It's the classic.
I've seen it myself. I've had it happen myself, because it's almost like in the same theme of you just mentioned about how does a small little Vancouver company become this, well, globally recognized organization. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of other people who go, they're based in Vancouver. They're 4 blocks down the street, and we should be awarding this to some, New York-based company or somebody from Paris or.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're still chasing down some local customers. They're waiting for us to be the real thing, you know. And so it took off, and then I think the deal that they were talking about in the dressing room there was so after a pretty long record of success with the Us Geological Survey. I keep on mentioning them because they are the biggest agency like this in the world. Then we won a follow-on contract to manage the entire all the data behind the U.S. National Water Information System. So although it's hosted in their private cloud, they host it. It's our software that's connecting to all their sensors. It's managing all their lab samples, all their field notes. It's a massive system. Like I said, hundreds of billions of data points. And every 15 minutes we're connecting to thousands and thousands of sensors, these real-time water level and water quality sensors.
All across the nation,
all across the U.S. Yeah. And bring it to a centralized area. They had originally had 45 different data centers, kind of had it sort of almost one per state. And now it's all centralized locally. We connect to it within 1 minute, connect all the sensors through telemetry, pull it in, compress it in a database, run derivations on it, basically, run it through models, converting water level to discharge and things like turbidity to sediment, which is sort of how cloudy the water is, how dirty it is, all within a minute. And it's an amazing. It truly is an IoT, Internet of Things, big data. Yeah. And so, and we've carried that success on. So then, kind of finishing the sort of getting closer to now. So we had, it really came to a spot a few years ago. I was like, well, this is the biggest system in the world for these environmental data sets. And it's really in the source water and receiving environment. But there's all this stuff happening where people are living in the cities in particular. I want to get in there. And so we ended up having meetings with a private equity firm out of Toronto called XPP Water Partners. They're the world's biggest private firm just focused on water. They're
Really?
about a $500 million fund.
Wow.
And we sat down and kind of talked about where we wanted to go, and it seemed to be a really good corporate or cultural fit. And then we did a deal where they bought out all the shares for all my hockey buddies that had invested in the early days. Very risky bet probably at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So they bought them out and brought in some growth equity, and we acquired a couple companies, WaterTrax and Linko. And so WaterTrax is focused on drinking water.
WaterTrax?
WaterTrax. So it was actually another Vancouver company.
Oh, wow.
A small company that we had known, and they focus on drinking water and wastewater compliance, so managing all the lab samples.
Okay.
So samples are taken, sent to a lab. This is the more traditional way. And the software is a software as a service, sitting in the cloud. And as samples are made available to the lab, they're uploaded into WaterTrax. It looks for contaminants. You think about like Flint, Michigan, or Walkerton in Canada, looking for, lead, bacteria, other things.
Yeah.
So it was exciting for me to get into the cities, into the pipes, to the treatment plants.
Sure.
And they also manage wastewater data. And we started talking a lot about wastewater at the beginning, how big of a problem it is.
Yeah.
And then the other company's out of Denver called Linko. And this manages, this company or brand, it's again, software company manages industrial waste. So it's called Industrial Pre-Treatment Program. So if there's some type of industrial operation, they have to pre-treat their waste before it goes into the utility sewer system. It's not made necessarily to handle radioactive waste or heavy metals. And then they also manage something called FOG. It stands for fats, oil, and grease. So if you'd ever watched the news the last couple of years, it's pretty obscure, but things called fatbergs, like in London. Did you ever hear about them?
No,
in the news?
Fat what?
Fatbergs. So it's like, if you think
Fatbergs.
of all the greasy frying pans of the world, dumping that oil down the drain, well, it plugs up the sewers, which think, well, who cares, but then that backs up the sewers, and the raw sewage overflows onto the streets or into your basement, and it's quite dangerous.
Really?
So so there's a program to make sure cities will have fats, oil, and grease compliance programs. We'll go around inspecting sites, making sure that they're have grease traps to make sure that doesn't get in, and that those are pumped out and disposed of.
Okay.
So that goes back to the passion about 2 million kids dying per year, sewage overflows, and what do a bunch of software nerds? What can we do about a bunch of nerdy PhD propeller head?
Yeah.
We don't put in treatment plants, we don't put pipes in.
Yeah.
So trying to help manage this system, identify where the problems are, and it's estimated that there's a $1.7 trillion gap between the infrastructure that the budget that's or 1.7 trillion is needed to replace the aging infrastructure in North America, and only about a third.
Just North America.
And only about.
I thought you were about to tell me the planet, but no, just
North America. And only about a third of that is available. So utilities have a hard time raising. If you're a new mayor coming in, you're not going to triple the water bills on your term, because you're not going to get back in, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the classic sort of challenge that you'll have in politics, and so the stuff doesn't get fixed. So as a bunch of nerds, our idea is, okay, well, we only have a third of the money, so we just have to do it smarter. So what they'll do now with infrastructure, they'll go into an area, and they'll close down a whole city block or many blocks, and you have seen this around Vancouver, and they'll do a major infrastructure project where they'll dig up the road and put in new pipe. Well, it turns out about 75% of the pipes they pull up are still good. So if you could just go in and surgically replace what needs to be fixed, or go in and do maintenance, find out where the fatbergs are going to form, and remove those problems, then perhaps you could do it at a third of the price. And that's our mission as a bunch of software nerds, trying to help utilities run more efficiently. So for a third of the cost, maybe some money in the budget they have now, they can do a better job and replace infrastructure.
Okay.
It's a little different situation in developing countries where they might not even have infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's certainly another challenge we'd like to help out too.
Yeah. Wow. What a great story. And one of the things that caught my attention is how you said that if you hadn't done more market research, you might not have gotten this business. I think if there's anything people can learn from a success story like yourself, Ed, is, I went to business school for my undergrad, and they taught you about doing market research and all this kind of stuff. And in my view, a lot of times it's a bunch of garbage.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes the best thing you can do is go in with just a bunch of inspiration and excitement, and figure it out while you're going through it.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of things that make,
because sometimes people overanalyze.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, you're a business guy. The stats, like less than 5% of companies make it over $1 million in revenue. Half of them fail along the way, like in the first year. So only 5%, and then to make it over 10 million is it's like 0.5%.
Yeah.
So the odds of making it are really small.
Yeah.
And then if you're in an industry like water, it's even smaller.
Well, we're going to carry on this conversation about the success you've had, what your business is doing today, how many employees you have, the kind of, and I want to get into some specific questions I have about things I've always wondered about water. And so I'm really excited to come back with Ed Quilty here in a minute. All right, here we are back with Ed Quilty talking about water. So Ed, how many employees do you have today?
We've got, I think, about 120.
Okay.
I think, because we just acquired a company we've officially announced it last week, actually, a company out of Florida.
Out of Florida.
That expands what we can do in the water segment. It's a little bit of our strategy now since doing this. I mentioned XPV Water Partners. Part of our strategy of growth. I also mentioned it's hard to grow in the water space, quickly.
Yeah.
So we are growing at a good clip organically, but inorganically we're acquiring smaller software companies that complement our coverage of the complete water cycle. So this company we bought a couple weeks ago, or announced it last week actually, out of Florida. They cover something I'm sure you will never have heard of. It's called backflow prevention devices.
Okay.
So these you'll start seeing them everywhere. There's millions of these around North America and worldwide, and they have to be inspected.
Just to make sure my toilet doesn't get backed up when my
your whole house actually. So all your toilets, and they're mostly the ones we haven't. That the software we provide is to help utilities inspect ones that are on private property, and they'll be like at hospitals, at universities, at big towers. Larger buildings have these big backflow devices to make sure that if pressure drops in the main system, that the water from that building doesn't flow back into the system and then go elsewhere. You could imagine it could have, once it gets into that building that's off utility property, they have no idea what's going on in there, right? No control.
Right.
It could be lead poisoning.
Yeah, sure.
There could be, a lot of contaminants. So this, helps, further our vision for managing all water across the water cycle.
And just to be clear, your business is about managing the data and the information, interpreting it in a valuable way, and then giving feedback to your customers. You don't actually sell devices, install devices, correct, manage those devices.
We're a 100% software company.
Software.
We do some really interesting projects. So our customers are the ones that will, they use our software. They're the ones managing the data, but we allow them to more efficiently manage that water information and automate processes.
Okay.
A pretty cool story. It's interesting. I mentioned that I took a year off and traveled around the world.
Yeah. And you said somehow that tied into your business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, if you're thinking, as an entrepreneur, you kind of thinking you tend to start where you're comfortable.
Yeah.
So I started in BC and had been in the U.S. a little bit.
This is your backpacking venture. Okay.
So backpacking venture actually, no, that's where business started. But backpacking venture. Me and 3 other guys just landed. First stop was Kuta Beach in Indonesia.
Okay.
And we traveled around Indonesia and up into Malaysia and Thailand and then down to Australia. And then later went to South America, traveled through there. So did pretty wide coverage. And if you put a map of where I traveled and that break year and where our first customers in North America, it's like perfectly overlaps.
Really?
And it's kind of like...
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I think I was familiar with those cultures. I realized those people are just people like everyone else. They might have slightly different sort of culture or language, but
they're all human bodies that need to live off of
same problem, same people, really nice people everywhere, water. Same challenges. So it kind of, I felt like, I really enjoyed being in Thailand, and that was the Thailand Royal Irrigation District is one of our customers now.
Wow.
But a really interesting project is called the Smart Tunnel in Malaysia.
Okay.
So they had two big challenges in Malaysia. One, before we did this project there, one is that they had heavy traffic congestion. And the other
is this in Kuala Lumpur?
Yeah, in
Okay.
KL. Yeah, and the other one is the city used to flood 8-10 times a year, cause a lot of damage and
Right,
disruption.
I heard about this actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big problem, and this is something we do worldwide. A lot of countries like Brisbane, or cities like Brisbane in Australia and others, we help them with their flood information system.
Brisbane gets a lot of
forecasting.
flooding too?
It does, yeah. Yeah. And in fact, there's a flood in 2010, 2011, right around Christmas there, that caused billions of dollars worth of damage.
Yeah.
So this
And I'm assuming this is going to be more relevant if the truth is, I mean, it was most
Climate
people,
change?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they say that sea levels are rising.
Yeah,
It doesn't sound like much, but they say like it's going to go up by 30 centimeters or something like
Yeah.
that. I don't know.
If you live on Miami Beach, or if you're in the Maldives, or something, it's a big deal there. Or, there's some really challenging problems there.
Yeah.
Because of course people love living on the beach or in coastal
sure, of
areas, right?
course,
Where there's ports and
Yeah. So this tunnel, what's it called?
smart tunnel.
Smart
and
tunnel.
so it's interesting. This kind of covers what you can do when you automate, water information, the collection, the management of decisions. So there's a network of rain sensors around KL, and then there's sensors in the river. And we're used to dealing with stuff pretty normally, so we're connecting the sensors, and collecting the data. And we also have a model there that forecasts what's going to happen in the river. So if a big monsoon comes in, in the next 24 hours, this river's coming up. In fact, in the next 3 hours, it's going to spill the banks and it's going to flood the city. So that's where the story used to end. You forecast, and then maybe you'd, evacuate parts of the town or neighborhoods. So what we do in the smart tunnel is we're saying, river's going to blow. So start diverting the river into a car tunnel. So this is a 10-kilometer long car tunnel. It's got traffic going both ways, and we start flooding the tunnel. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
There's actually cars in this
cars
tunnel?
in it. And so in the bottom, if you think of like a pipe, so they've got cars going, and now on the bottom round part, we start flooding that. And then, that floodwater bypasses the city and goes down into a reservoir, no problem. But then if the river is really rising, then you drop the gates, you evacuate the tunnel, and you flood the tunnel. It holds a tremendous amount. If you think about
That's amazing.
10-kilometer long tunnel. And so
did you guys come up with a smart tunnel?
we were part of the project. We do the software back. We
Yeah.
didn't obviously do the drilling,
Yeah.
and we worked with a consulting firm that did a lot of the kind of putting it all together. But we're the software behind it, connects to the sensors and runs the model and does the forecasting and helps send the command.
Has it ever had to be? Has there ever been a time where there's so much water that they have had to close off the roadway?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it's
for
been done.
Yeah.
It's been used.
It saved, I think their estimates are it saved about $2.5 billion worth of damage.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's a cool project. And in
Wow.
Brisbane, we've got a similar project and some others. So, it's pretty diverse. Like I talked about drinking water
Yeah.
in pipes. I think about Flint, Michigan and Walkerton, Canada, wastewater going into the environment, floods, hydropower, irrigation. You think California and Central Valley. It's such a diverse space. And the water obviously doesn't care about boundaries and people and factories. So you
takes the path of least resistance.
Yeah, that's right.
doesn't it? Yeah.
And so, I mean, you have to manage any piece well, you kind of have to have all the information. And so that's really our goal, is to tap into all that data, pull it together, make it useful.
Wow, that's really cool. All right, well, let me dive in some questions that are just burning in my head right now. So, first one is, as I mentioned to you before we started filming, my wife was the one who inspired me to start getting these reusable water bottles, and I take this around everywhere with me religiously, because I find that most airports around the world have filtered water.
They do,
So, there's kind of three benefits. One is good for the environment because I'm not using plastic water. You also get gouged big time once you get through security.
That's right.
Like $7 for like a half liter of water. And it's good to stay hydrated when you're traveling. I do have a tendency to just drink as much as I don't like the taste.
Yeah.
And I'm no knock against these wonderful communities, but like I find like the water in Calgary and like Toronto, it just tastes really bad. Is that reason that I don't like the taste?
No,
because I'm just used to Vancouver's water, and it also tastes bad. Like, do people that come from Calgary and Toronto to Vancouver go, man, this water tastes horrible?
That bitter taste is the hockey rivalry you're tasting. That's the pure hate for the Leafs and for the Flames. That's what it is, actually. No, it's interesting to say that. So, talk about water bottle companies like Nestle, for example. They'll set up regional areas because people develop a taste for their local water.
Right.
So it's true. If people from Toronto come here like, oh, that Vancouver water is terrible.
Do they really?
Yeah, or that's pretty universal. You go down, you'll find some water
you go
will
to
taste
London,
really chalky.
England,
It's
yeah.
You'll have really hard water, really soft water.
Yeah.
Chlorine is sort of a different part. They can be overly chlorinated, taste really chlorine. But I mean, just the water itself, you forget the chlorine. People develop different tastes where they grow up. Really? So just because we love our water here, doesn't mean it's the best tasting water.
Are there any places in the sort of big cities around the world where like everybody goes there and goes, man, this water is truly horrible?
Well, I mean, there's so many like that. I don't know. That's pretty much every city I go to, all the time. Yeah, I mean, I think the taste is obviously one. That's a bit more personal preference, but it's actually how safe is it.
Okay.
And
so I told you about that documentary. I don't know if you can pull it up, Ross. I think it was called Tapped. Phenomenal documentary.
Yeah.
And they talk about how in this documentary, who knows how accurate it is. You'll know. But it says that apparently most of the time you're safer to drink. You actually statistically are safer to drink municipal water that gets monitored all the time, as you were describing now, this constant monitoring, than to drink like bottled water that if it comes in, especially the ones that come in those big containers that you put onto the water cooler. Because sometimes if those are sitting for a year or half a year in
the
storage,
sunlight,
in the
plastic,
sunlight, the plastic, apparently the levels of negative, is that what it's called? Tapped?
Yeah, this is the trailer. I don't know if you wanted to listen to it, but
no, we can maybe look at it in a bit. But that's Tapped. So is municipal water? I mean, is it good to drink?
Generally, it's safe. Yeah, I mean, it depends where you're in the world.
Who's the top who are the top 3, 4, 5 countries that you pretty much know? Like, okay, if I go to this country, I can drink their water from any tap anywhere, and I'll be probably okay.
Yeah, well, Canada, the U.S., most places, it's certainly in Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Commonwealth countries, European, and it's much wider than that.
Yeah. Are there any countries that are really off, like do not? Like, for example, you see those horrible images of all those plastic bottles of water in Haiti.
Yeah.
And like they're piling up on these rivers and stuff.
Yeah.
Are there certain countries like that, like Haiti, where you just don't want to drink?
I speak from personal experience.
Yeah,
there's many countries I won't drink the water of the taps. Unfortunately, it's more. I'll rely more on the bottled water as much as I don't like to. There's lots of like you mentioned the plastic pollution and other potential contaminants, but generally much safer in those countries, and that's why, of course, people when they go to Mexico, they tend to drink it. Yeah. Drink bottled water, and if they drink tap water, it depends. If you're in some parts of Mexico, you'll get really sick. In other parts, it'll be just fine. And
my in-laws in the winter, they've got a place down in Puerto Vallarta.
Yeah.
And apparently, Puerto Vallarta is one of 2 cities in Mexico who've got some award. Yeah. Where they're actually known for how clean their tap water is, and you can just basically, and they've been there for like 7 years now. Yeah. All they do is drink the tap water, and they've never gotten sick.
Yeah. Well, I was just in Costa Rica a couple of months ago. Yeah. We drank the water. There, it was no problem. Yeah. So it depends on the infrastructure. Yeah. It's not only so generally yes, water that's treated from utility, they almost over treat it, so it's safe because they take a conservative approach. Yeah. But we talked earlier about infrastructure problems and this 1.7 trillion. So, it was interesting. All the pipes that were installed sort of 120 years, they're starting to 120 years ago are starting to fail now. The ones that were installed about 60 years ago are starting to fail now. The ones that are installed like 30 years ago are starting to fail now. It's kind of like that's just how things are made now, right?
Things used to be made better
these giant,
100 years ago.
Huge pipes that were could withstand a nuclear bomb, basically. It's like just anything they made. If you think of the way they used to make cars or anything, fridges used to last 40 years. Now
you should see my black and white television. That thing is still a monster.
Yeah.
It just keeps working.
Yeah, you might want to get a new one. I don't know, but
6 channels in the dial.
So there's this big, infrastructure problem. So these pipes do fail, and about 30% of the water that utilities treat, depends on the city, of course, but on average, goes out through leaky pipes, into the ground, and it can be contaminated. And so lots of stuff can grow in the pipes, so they have to put pretty high chlorine levels, but not too high because that can be carcinogenic. So it's it's a little tricky, but they generally do a really good job. Yeah. But lots of parts of the world they won't have.
And does your company monitor drinking water?
Yeah.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
There's another one, Ross, that NDP MP Charlie Angus. I know he's been a real big advocate for. There's an indigenous community up north, and they've got lead in their water. They've been talking. He's been talking about, do you know which one I'm talking about? The community I'm talking about?
Yeah, there's a few. Like in Canada, it's a massive problem. It's certainly not limited to one community. It's many communities. In fact, on our one brand water tracks, we one of our bigger customers is Indigenous Services Canada. So a lot of that, the water that the federal government collects, the water samples they collect, goes through our system.
Yeah.
No, there's problems.
So where is this? Well, maybe it was not lead. Maybe it's mercury. How do you get it? How do you get mercury into your drinking water? Is that coming from some mine nearby or something, or what's that? Yeah,
I mean, mercury. There can be natural sources, but it's generally from industry. Like if you think of like silver mines and like other industries that use mercury. There was actually one in Squamish that used to pour. I forget what it was. It was like 100 kilograms of mercury a day into the Squamish Bay there.
That's crazy.
It might have been less 10. But
what for those that don't remember, because it was quite a while ago. What happened in Walkerton? Walkerton's in Ontario, right? Is it southwestern Ontario?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what happened there?
Yeah, so now put me on the spot for the numbers, but basically, I think it was in the range of about 100 people died and a few thousand people got sick, as from E. coli poisoning. And so there were I believe it was two brothers running the drinking water plant. And you can imagine you're a small town. You wouldn't be getting the world's expert water people to run your plant. So this is a challenge for all smaller communities. It's hard to afford the best technologies, and it's hard to attract the best people. So they had a small town. It seems like the story was like these two guys probably didn't know what they're doing. Believe they there is E. coli. There's E. coli detected in the water.
And that's
believe
from
they didn't
fecal
report
matter?
it. Yeah.
Okay.
It can come from a variety of sources.
Could be like just chickens from a chicken farm.
Yeah, it could be human. Could be a whole variety of sources. I don't remember in the particular case. It was as you know, it was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And they ended up not reporting, I believe is what happened, that there's these issues, and the town got very sick.
Oh, wow.
And a number of people died, and a lot of people got sick.
Yeah.
It was a pretty brutal thing, and that forever changed the Canadian water landscape.
It was brought to people. I mean, people started thinking about more. You do a lot of municipalities.
Yeah.
How many municipalities in Canada do you have roughly?
Well, in North America, so most of our business is in the U.S.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
obviously a bigger market.
Obviously,
We've got about 1,500 utilities or municipalities.
Yeah.
And mostly in the U.S. Canada is probably in the range of maybe 100 or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What's turbidity? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. So it's basically if you took a bunch of soil and put it in the water and saw how it got cloudy. It's a measure of how dirty the water is, how cloudy it is.
Yeah.
And that's important. It's obviously for aesthetics.
Yeah.
It's important, but it can be a place for bacteria to hide.
Okay.
So if water is really muddy, it's harder to treat with chlorine. It kind of protects the bacteria like E. coli.
Yeah.
Fecal coliforms more.
Yeah. I remember that word because I don't know if you remember about 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, we had that huge runoff into our local waters, and the water, you had to put the kids in the bath. You drank the water; it was like super murky.
Yeah, you shouldn't drink the bath water and your kids in there. That's kind of gross.
Well, we're trying to be ultra conservative in our environmental impact.
Yeah.
And then I remember talking to who oversees water here in the city of Vancouver? Is it Metro Vancouver?
Yeah, Metro Van.
Yeah. So I remember calling someone there, and they're like reassured me like this, and even though it doesn't look good, it's totally fine.
Yeah,
like it's
and
still well below,
Yeah.
But you mentioned turbidity, and then you mentioned something else, some other kind of terminology for
suspended sediment.
No, I can't remember what it was now. But there was some reference to what drinking water would look like or taste like.
Oh, hardness.
Yeah, maybe hardness.
Yeah, hardness. Yeah. Like you can have water in some areas can be really chalky.
Yeah.
For people like from Vancouver, but there it tastes great. It's more like mineral water.
So like like in London, England, I notice every time I go there, I stay in a hotel, I can't get the friggin' soap off my body. I go and have a shower and I put the soap on. I don't know if it's the soap or the water, but I'm pretty sure I've used different bars of soap.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that. I'm assuming something's going on with the water there.
Yeah, it doesn't happen to me. I don't know. I don't know what you're doing.
Maybe I don't shower enough.
Yeah, that's probably it. Yeah, you should shower more. Use soap more.
So I mentioned earlier, my folks, my whole family lives in Victoria, and like they're well known for just dumping. Is it true they dump raw sewage out into the ocean, right?
Yeah, they do some treatment. I believe it's changing. Again, we do most of our business in the U.S. So I don't follow the local scene as much as I should, but I think they do. The first sort of level of screening, but they don't do complete treatment.
Yeah.
Like,
can you walk us through what a screening, like in a really good system, like maybe here in Metro Vancouver, like you said, the first level of screening, like what is that? Is that just pulling?
Well, it's kind of what it sounds. So a treatment system, and I'm not an expert. I'm like again, I'm a software nerd, right? More of an environmentalist, but treatment plants, they obviously have a bunch of solid waste coming in, and it'll have diapers in it and human waste and all sorts of stuff, and so they have different ways to slowly purify it. So initial screening would be get, as bad as it sounds, all the big stuff out, and then they do further treatment through different filtration process and other screening and chemical. So there's actually a variety of ways you could treat and to remove the biosolids out and purify it, and it obviously costs more the further you treat it. So and you can do UV screening at the end or treatment at the end, and then chlorination. And I think Victoria for years had sort of their mandate was a bit more the solution to pollution is dilution. Like just dump it in the ocean, and it's gonna disappear. It's a huge ocean. And they're it's not the solution.
No, it's got to be fixed. Someone within the provincial provincial government in BC told me once that apparently it was someone in the municipality of Oak Bay said that there's sort of two schools of thought as to how that water should be treated. One was to have one massive facility that everything gets piped into. But the problem is the infrastructure is extremely old. And the other one was to have these smaller treatment centers. Have you ever noticed with all the work you've done, like what systems kind of work best, or does it depend on the city, I guess?
I think it depends on the city and their infrastructure. Like I said, if you have to build, pipes around, depends on how, hard that is to do. But most utilities will have many treatment plants rather than one central one. I think that's more typical.
I've driven out through the sort of industrial heartland of Canada in Hamilton area. And I wonder about the water out there. I've never lived out there. Some wonderful people live out there, and they, obviously those big factories employ a lot of people. But do you have any sense of what do you do any work out there in that industrial belt in Hamilton, where you got all these factories right on the lake?
Yeah. I mean, indirectly yes, but not directly. Like again, our Environment Canada is a big customer of ours. And so a lot of different agencies will be in there, but we don't, get so involved with the different projects. We sell them the platform so they can process the information. We have access to a bit more data now, where we're actually hosting the data. Because like I'd mentioned, we talked about Walkerton, these smaller utilities won't have, the budget or, to really have the world-class people or technologies, and so they're doing more outsourcing. Can also be for running the treatment plants. There's a lot of big private companies like Veolia and Suez and Aqua America and others that will manage these smaller utilities, and they'll manage hundreds or thousands of them. So they can more centralize the expertise, and that's happening on the digitization side too. So that's what we're really doing. We're trying to modernize these utilities where a lot of this information is kept on paper. If you think in Walkerton, you help digitize that, and you can send notifications out to multiple people and automate. And so that's a lot of that's moving more to being hosted by a vendor too, like where we can manage that their information in the cloud. It's, more secure if they might not even have an IT department. That's a bit of a trend.
Okay, you're collecting all this data, and you're probably seeing there's just a vast number of customers you have. Pick a sector, whether it's clean drinking water or wastewater treatment or monitoring of water used for industrial purposes. Do you ever get asked, or do you work as like almost a consultant? So like you see, for example, in Kuala Lumpur, this, smart tunnel system, and then you turn around and you talk to your customers in Copenhagen, Denmark, and they, you kind of share these ideas or share like the data you get? Are you able to kind of like turn around to some customers and say, you should really install these sensors in your system because we've got 4 other communities that are doing the same that are doing what you're not doing. Yeah. And here's what's happened as a result. And they've set money they've saved or less people getting sick, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean, that's certainly an advantage, right? If you're a little town, and your only real expertise is that town, your experience is limited to that town, where if we've got thousands. So obviously we can start drawing conclusions, connecting the dots. I
mean, I got to think over time, it just makes you as a company a lot more competitive.
Yeah, you allow them to benchmark what they're doing against others and move towards best practices. So that's we can start building that into the software. In some cases, we're already doing that. I mentioned this one company we bought just this past month out of Florida called Toothpaste Software. So they help provide the software for these backflow prevention or cross-connection devices. But while they're doing that, they really help them set up these programs to use best practices. Like, how would you set up the system? How would you plan out your sampling? How often to collect? So as part of the software platform allows them to automate and digitize also best practices seen across, hundreds or thousands of utilities. Yeah. So that's another way we can definitely help. Okay.
Are there any municipalities in North America that you would say, they are a phenomenal example of how how you should manage your water systems? Like, then you go, wow, these guys are really dialed in. And it's not just because they got a bunch of money, but maybe they're being smart with the way they do it.
Well, there's certainly some utilities that are really innovative.
Yeah. Like who?
Well, like DC Water is Washington, D.C. Yeah. I know the former general manager there, George Hawkins. They are so innovative, working with private industry, pushing the envelope, taking risks, but within sort of safe, bit of a safety net. They really push it, and they run a really well-respected utility that provide high quality end product, drinking water and wastewater services at a good price. Now, they went through a lot of challenges, like they did raise the rates, but they did a lot of marketing to the community, explaining why. Because a lot of people don't think about water. Yeah, I'll be at like a cocktail party, the classic, and people ask me what I do. And they're like, "That's a thing." Why would anybody do that? Like, no one thinks they just turn the tap and water pours out, right? Or flush the toilet and it's gone. Yeah. No one thinks about it. So to educate the public, you need to educate the public, and then you can start being more innovative, I think.
Do you have any concerns about where our planet is going as far as like the access to clean water for human population?
Yeah, it's a massive problem. It's only getting worse. Like,
is it because the supply is running out, or because we're not treating it properly, or it's not being recycled, or what's
we have many forces coming at us, right? So we have population growth. Yes. You have developing countries that, as we know, they used to use less energy, used to waste less water and food, and they all want to live the...
Yeah, they treaded lighter on the earth because they didn't have anything. Yeah. They didn't really do anything. Yeah. Especially they're rural, just,
So exactly. So it's just, there's, as people are moving into the middle class and up, we're creating more garbage, more plastic, more pollution. And it's not really turning around. And you look at, with climate change, it's very hard for politicians to do much about it, right? Yeah. Like, we need to slam the brakes on now, but people just aren't going to do it, right? Yeah. There's very few countries or politicians are brave enough to really take a hard stand. Yeah. Because they probably won't get voted in again, right? Right. We see it. There's lots of examples right now where people will choose economy over.
You need a guy like Donald Trump who doesn't give a shit, but is actually a decent person.
Yeah, that's right. Like, if he cared about the climate,
in the sense that he doesn't give a shit what people think, but he also doesn't, because of that, he doesn't give a shit about the environment. It's like, if it's not towards profits or for his own personal gain.
He had someone that just took a hard stance. Certainly that'd be helpful. And there's a few countries that are working hard on this, but it kind of like one drops out that everyone's like, well, we can't economically suffer if they could take advantage. And so it's a tough situation, but it's getting worse. Climate change is also making it more challenging, because it's like, if you think even BC here, I'm sure you've noticed, most people are noticing, the summer's a lot longer and drier. We're starting to get water restrictions, and we're often getting the same amount of precipitation, but it's just compressed into a really shorter period. So we're getting really wet winter. So that most of that runs off into the ocean. Yeah. And then long summers, and so then we drain through our storage. So that's and it varies where you're in the world. It's different in the tropics versus other areas, but so climate change is putting a lot of pressure. It's changing. So the infrastructure that the utilities put in, or municipalities, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, were designed for a different climate. I've heard I've even heard I saw a report maybe last year somewhere that they're predicting, like here in Vancouver, that eventually, like not that far out, maybe 30 years out, our climate will be like San Diego here.
Really?
And so we haven't designed this city to be, like San Diego weather. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Read it.
This is why I always say don't invest in any business that's investing in the ski hills.
Yeah, exactly. Unless they're way far north.
Yeah, exactly.
Even then. So I don't know. It's a big problem.
Yeah, isn't there some talk about Las Vegas running out of water at some point in the next 20 years or something?
Well, in South Africa, you probably heard about day zero, where they were running out of water this past year.
Joburg or something, was it?
Johannesburg, yeah. And lots of Atlanta was facing it a number of years ago. This is just going to be a common thing more and more, where the cities were not designed. They got population growing. Their infrastructure was designed for a smaller city with a different climate. Yeah. So it's a big problem.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, we're going to come back in a minute with Ed Quilty, and I want to ask you a bunch of more questions of just things that are going off in my head now about all this stuff, because you're right, on a day-to-day basis, you don't really think about your water consumption or water usage. Yeah. But now I'm thinking, man, what about this and what about that? Yeah. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and wrap it up with a few of these questions.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Ed. Great, okay, we're back with Ed Quilty. I'm going to wrap it up here with a bunch of questions that are going on my mind. So microbeads, what are your thoughts on that? I don't know do we have microbeads in North America still? And what are they? Is it in our system? Do your sensors collect that kind of information?
Yeah. So plastics, when they break down, which they do under UV and other, they turn into micro particles, and that stuff just floats on the top. Sure, it's in fresh water, it's in lakes. If you think of the Great Lakes and others, but it's a big problem in the oceans, and then it gets consumed as food, because you have these zooplankton and other marine species that'll eat them, and then larger fish eat them and birds eat them, and so it goes through the ecosystem, and then they'll at times they'll starve because they feel full, but they're full of plastic that they can't digest.
Crazy.
Massive problem. So it's getting a lot of public attention, obviously, for finding ways to reduce plastic waste and packaging and straws and everything.
I had heard that they actually had microbeads in toothpaste. Can you look that up, Ross, to see if they? I'm pretty sure there was like this Greenpeace type group out of Canada who was like trying to advocate that Health Canada regulate toothpaste, and maybe I'm going way off.
Could be some kind of abrasive for the teeth. I'm not a microbead expert, but
I think that's what it was. It was to help kind of like get the toothpaste working better on the enamel of your teeth.
It's kind of like a scrub, like where you do those spa scrubs, where they've sand or whatever.
Yeah, you got some there, Ross?
Yeah, it seems to be kind of a popular topic. So, Procter & Gamble here says that they're actually safe.
That they're safe.
Yeah, so they might intentionally put them in their toothpaste.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk about getting rid of microbeads from toothpaste. Okay. And what other things are in our waters that you get monitoring data from that are like human created, that you're like, oh wow, really?
Yeah. Well, again, going back to young kids, pesticides is something that I care about a lot. In fact, so much I joined as a board member in a local company. That's an amazing company called Semios Bio, where they help avoid the use of pesticides, use natural sources using IoT and big data, using machine learning to actually identify pests when they come in, then use this natural pheromone that attracts insects, so you don't need to spray pesticide.
Oh, wow.
Amazing company, growing very fast here in Vancouver. But pesticides get into the water.
See, I'm glad to hear that, because I have a lot of my people that I know, like friends of mine, even a couple of family members who have been passionate about, or like local and organic agriculture and food, like food systems. And I've been buying organic since it basically became a thing. it's been what 15, and people will say, oh, well, there's no proof that organic is more healthy for you than conventional. I've always made the claim that, you know what, at the end of my life, maybe it's not, but I got to think that there's something really negative about the plantations that are growing bananas, for example. Like I'm willing to pay the extra 20 cents per pound for organic bananas versus the conventional, because there are families with young children, many of whom are out in those plantations picking those things, that are going to be exposed to those, whether it's in the air or it's in the water system.
Yeah, I think there is mounting evidence that it's a big problem. I've seen studies all the time now showing how big of a problem pesticides are. There's, you think all the waste, all the industry, so many things getting into our water, and then we end up drinking.
What about, do you guys ever do any, like, so there's, I was thinking, I mentioned earlier about the Mount Poly mine that was owned by Imperial Metals here in BC, and they have when they mine, they have what's called a tailing pond, and it broke, and this thing was leaching out all sorts of nasty stuff. Do you guys monitor the water around those areas, or do you guys ever get involved in these kind of events? Yeah,
so certainly our customers do. Again, we're a software platform, and we've got thousands of customers around the world using it to monitor things exactly like that. So looking at the flows above and below, they can look at levels in the tailings ponds, flows in and out. They can look at the water quality. They can look at the permitting requirements around the river. Are they meeting the permitting requirements? Once
do you ever get pulled, an event like that, which is kind of an unexpected event, do you ever get pulled in last minute saying, hey, we're going to start monitoring this water right away, we got to put some sensors in right away and start collecting data on how bad it's going to be?
Not really, because we don't build sensors, we just sell the software. So they'll expand the system, they'll install new sites or collect more data, and that'll go through our system. But our system kind of scales automatically. It's we don't usually get pulled into the specifics.
Is artificial intelligence something that's on the horizon in the data analysis that you're doing, or is it already part of your business?
Oh yeah, I mean, man, it's amazing. I mean, I go to this event in August every year called Singularity in San Francisco. Amazing event, a lot of machine learning, some of the, looking at the predictions of like self-driving cars and forecasts are things are happening much faster than any of the sort of the government forecasts. But in our space, it's really it's I believe it's prime for machine learning. I talked about how there's a real specialized expertise required to run these to keep us safe, to run these treatment plants, drinking water and wastewater, to manage all environmental data, and so much data coming in. Going back to how I started my career, overwhelmed with data, and trying to automate that. And machine learning is perfect for that, for connecting the dots. And if you have a lot of data set from different cities, you can start connecting dots, predicting trends, automating, predictions of what are going to happen, telling the crews where they should go. You basically take all the data utility has. We're doing some pilots right now where we look at all their, asset management, all their pipes, all their pumps, all their treatment stations, all the climate data, rain, river, groundwater, all the information in the city. Lab samples, pull that together and just let the machine learning spin and look for interesting trends. And it's super amazing.
And are you able to look at that work you're doing now, bring it back to your customers, and actually see how customers are able to either cut costs or do better job of managing their water?
Yeah, so both is the hope. So that's the pilots we're running are really looking at one of them. We've got 4 going right now, but one of them is looking a bit of a new passion of mine, sewage. Which I would have never thought would be a real passion of mine.
That takes you back to pumping fish poop.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
you're right. I think that's where it came from.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at, like I said, there's trillions of gallons of sewage just in North America pouring out to the environment through overflows, and storm will hit a city, and the city's not
This is
built.
part of that stat you gave us, that 70% of the world's water goes completely untreated.
80%.
Or 80%.
Yeah. And so you'll have a city that will just be overwhelmed by a storm, or they'll have a failed infrastructure, a pipe gets blocked, or a pump fails that's pumping the sewage around, and it flows out, and then people get sick. Or the environment, is polluted. And so using machine learning to collect all this data and trying to predict where these things are going, they're quite hard to predict. This could be as simple as like someone throws those, flushable wipes. They're not flushable. They'll go down your toilet, but they'll block the sewage, and then they'll call it back, a blockage, and then it'll overflow. And there's lots of other things that a pipe could collapse, like I said. So we're trying to use machine learning to predict likelihood of failure events when pumps will go down, when pipes will fail, when trees will grow into the pipes, the tree roots, and break the pipes, and trying to look at those type of things, so that it said there's 1.7 trillion required investment for infrastructure in North America, and only a third is available. With machine learning, I think we can be really efficient and hopefully do it for a third, so we can make those investments, do very surgical replacement of pipes, surgical management, so sending crews out to very specific places at the right time, replace, rather than just doing it the old way is not working. So machine learning, and there's lots.
You
of
sound to me like the radiologist of the doctor fields, where their job is to kind of now go in, analyze a human body, and instead of if someone needs a bypass surgery, you're going to be able to dial in exactly where you're going to go before you even cut the patient open. Because you mentioned earlier that some of the pipes that get, what was it, 70%?
75%.
They get pulled up.
Life in them.
There's still life in them.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, that's interesting.
And there's a bunch of other applications we're looking at too, but it's such an exciting area because there's so much data. Yeah. And most of it has been in silos, untouched. Like less than 1%. It's about 0.5% of all data is even been used for anything. Yeah. So we've collected more data in the last 2 years than all of history. Really? About 90% of utilities, I think it's about 88% of utilities, don't have a data management system that really manages data properly. Wow. And only 0.5% of data is even being used. And so, of course, we're not doing the things, managing the systems as best we could. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. You're clearly an entrepreneur, despite you kind of saying, "Well, I was just a biologist." It's very obvious. And you suggested you could give some recommendations. I mean, you've only. I like to think I'm young. You and I are about the same age, so you still got lots ahead in your future. But up to this point, what are some of the things that you think got you to this level of success? Grittiness, I think, is big. I mean, I was like a lot of, entrepreneurs, I came from an Irish immigrant family, an immigrant story. That gives you the ability to, take risks. I think you do know that risks aren't really that big. We've got a pretty nice safety net here in Canada in particular. Yeah. So you can take some risks and you're going to be fine. Yeah. Grittiness, like I said, when I started the company, I didn't do a big market research. I just saw a problem I was passionate about, and I was hell-bent to do something about it. Yeah. And it was just grittiness. I think of all the challenges we've had along as a company, any company. Yeah. You have to go through all these valleys of death. You know, it's like the first startup where 95% don't make it over 1 million, 50% die, and only 5% make it over 1 million. And then it's like 0.5% make it to sort of 10 million. So there's all these, everything's against you. So I think the grittiness is really important. And then, team, people say, well, you guys are a tech company, big data, IoT, machine learning. We're a people company. Yeah. So I think one of the things I worked hard at was trying to find the right people and a really good, process for growing them, and, getting good coaching and training and a lot of continuous learning. I go to MIT every year for school. I'm actually flying off tomorrow. Okay. And that's a big part of our company is we want everyone to be best in the world, and they don't have to start out that way. What kind of things do you do to support your employees? Yeah, we've got an interesting thing because I don't know if you've heard about B Corp certification. Yeah. So we're a B Corp, which is very familiar with that. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. We're doing a lot of work on that right now. Yeah. So it's like certified organic. It's doing business for the purposes of good. So we're a B Corp. You've already got it now. Yeah. We've I think we're on our third recert now, and it's a pretty high bar, as to get. Yeah, absolutely. And we were lucky because that's sort of our culture. So we have this internal, one of our core values is we call it 3 Ps: planet, people, prosperity. So when faced with decisions, we try and balance them. There's sort of 3. We try and balance. It's not all about profits. In fact, we don't call it profit, as prosperity. Yeah. People, our customers, staff, planet, environmental side. So we try and manage those. So some of the things we do for, people's, we've got like a training budget. So what people want to get trained on, help them support their career and advancement. We give people 2 paid days off per year to go out and volunteer in the local community or environmental. Yeah. We donate software to, not-for-profits and other groups. And it's just kind of who we are. Yeah. Well, that's great, Ed. And I think it's really inspiring. I also think it's really neat because you're a dad of 2 young kids, and the work you do
is going to be something I think you'll be able to reflect back on, hopefully 20, 30 years from now, and be proud of what you've done to help. Because I do agree with you about the environment. It's a very important topic that we need to continue to address. There's no denial, in my view. If you're denying it, you're being ignorant.
Yeah.
And we got to find ways to maybe not reverse this trend, but at least try and slow it down.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's funny if a doctor comes in and gives you bad news, you're going to believe him because he's a doctor and he's got lots of experience. He's got the data. He's got all the scans and blood work and everything. 99% of the world scientists come and tell you the same thing. You're like, no, I don't believe in climate change.
Yeah.
I would like to. My hope would be to leave the planet in a better place for my kids. That would be the ultimate success for me.
Yeah.
Obviously, the decks are stacked against us, but I think through really technology and innovation, there's a lot of great stories happening out there. But there's also, like I said, a lot of ignorance that we're kind of battling. So it's hard, but hard is fun. I like hard. I'd like to believe we can leave it in a better place for our kids. I'd love that.
Yeah. Reminds me of the line from A League of Their Own with Tom Hanks and Gina Davis. As Gina Davis was crying. Do you remember that show?
Yeah.
That movie from years ago? And she starts crying, and he's like, "Why are you crying? There's no crying in baseball."
Exactly.
And she says, "Well, it's just too hard." And he's like, "It's supposed to be hard. It's the hard that makes it good.
Yeah.
If it wasn't hard, everybody do it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. A couple more questions before we wrap it up, because they're just items that are on the top of my mind now as we've been going through this. Did I ask you about your view on plastic bottles and bottled water? I don't think I did.
No.
Yeah. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've traveled lots of places in the world where the water is unsafe. So there is a place where it, a time place where it is, I think, for me, the only option. But if most cities, I'll drink tap water.
Do you drink your tap water here in Vancouver?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you ever buy bottled water here?
No, we drink tap water. We've got a filter in our fridge that I change pretty religiously, but
okay. So you have a filter. So do you those companies like Brita? Do you do that? Like,
no, I just replaced the filter. It's more for taste. It's a charcoal filter in our fridge.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
Salmon Arm.
In Salmon Arm. Yeah. Does the water taste different there out of the tap than here?
It tastes different everywhere, right?
Yeah.
A little different everywhere. There are a lot of places where I go, like same thing on Lennon. It could be somewhere like I'm heading to Boston tomorrow morning. I know I don't like the tap water there. I'll turn it. I don't even want to brush my teeth with it, but
you will.
You will.
Where do we get our water from here in Vancouver? You live in West Van.
Yeah.
And I live over near UBC.
Yeah.
Are we drinking the same water?
Yeah.
We are? Where is it from?
Yeah. Well, generally it's from the same area. There's 3 reservoirs there.
Okay.
And
where are they?
On the North Shore. Like they're all like, Capilano and Seymour. You've probably been up there.
Yeah.
Like,
you kind of see it when you're going up the gondola or down the gondola.
Yeah,
Grouse Mountain there?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So those are our reservoirs. They're protected. They're in a parquet. We're pretty lucky. And then those water sources, most of the lower mainland, out in the valley, they actually use Norrish Creek out sort of in the Maple Ridge area. But and then within the city, some areas will get more of one reservoir than the other. They'll do some blending, I believe. Yeah. But generally, it's from the North Shore Mountains, all of us. Okay. So we're really lucky.
Is there fluoride in our water?
Good question. I believe they do that. That's something that's been pretty standard in Canada for a long time.
Do you guys monitor that? Is that one?
Can be, anything.
What are your views on having fluoride? I know my wife; she's a dentist, so she's a big pro on that.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on fluoride in the water system?
Yeah, I'm not very informed on it, but I'm kind of the same. I've been supportive for the teeth side, but I know there's some views that it's not a good thing to add, but I don't have a strong. I've been fine with it.
Yeah.
But
Are there any major cities that you would go to in this planet that you would drink the water that is not in what it's called North America or West, like any in like Asia or South America or Africa that you would go, I'm good with drinking their water?
I'd probably do a bit of research getting there, but like I said, it was in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
That's kind of
you mentioned that.
Most of Latin America, I probably wouldn't drink the water.
Yeah.
Including down through South America. I've been through.
Do you have your own little water testing device when you go into hotels beforehand?
No, I should though. I'm getting there. I would definitely like to.
That'd be pretty cool, actually. You could sell that on the home shopping channel, or eBay or Amazon.
Well, there are sensors coming out now for doing, residential, that are pretty cool, pretty sophisticated stuff. I'll definitely get those as those come on.
Yeah, that's cool. Wasn't there? I also heard about something in I think it was in India. There's like this new simple way for people to clean their water at final like little where. So they're getting dirty water, like tap water. I don't call it dirty, but tap water. It's not sure, and they don't have to boil it. They run it through some kind of filter. Those kind of things exist.
Yeah. So actually, a really effective way, not completely effective, but quite effective, is using sand. So sand filtration, even Lower Mainland here, they'll put our water through. They'll put these
just regular sand.
Yeah, it'll be like a 20 feet deep, 6 meter deep of sand, and that is a very good way of purifying water. And so that may be what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's also an interesting one. They take filters from renal units in hospitals, purify them, and then use them. There's a couple of companies that do this, and they'll take it to developing countries, use these really high quality filters that are disposed of. They had blood in them before, but they get them cleaned out.
Yeah. And
then use them for local villages in Africa and India and
really
others. It's pretty cool. I don't think it's widely used yet, but I've seen that come. So there are options like that too.
Yeah.
They're not the traditional ways, really.
Yeah. Well, Ed, this has been phenomenal. I'm really glad you came in. I'm hoping you have lots of success in the future with your business. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, thanks.
And maybe we'll have you come back like a year from now and tell us about all the other cool data you're collecting over the next.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
You said in the last 2 years you collected more data in the last 2 years than you ever have in.
Well, worldwide, we've collected more data ever. But the last 2 years, so our company's growing fast. We've acquired 3 companies.
Yeah.
We're managing more water data, we believe, than any other company in the world.
Yeah.
We're a little Vancouver company.
Wow. Good for
trying
you.
to get bigger.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, and thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate it, bud.
Yeah.